again, I apologize. Listen, 57 years after the assassination of Dr. King, and Dr. King talked about that stone of hope. And it's that stone of hope that gives me a fire in my belly each and every morning. It's that stone of hope that allows me to wake up and to stand to Donald Trump and to say, Donald Trump, I'm not afraid of you. It's that stone of hope. It's that stone of hope that gives me power. That's that stone of hope and the belief in each and every one of you to let you know that I'm not going to allow my ancestors, all of those who died for me, to be in this position. I am not going to disgrace them and disappoint them. I am going to use the law both as a sword and as a shield and challenge Donald Trump. And each and every time he issues an illegal executive order, I am going to stand up to him because he represents to me sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity.
So that right there was the New York State Attorney General Letitia James at the National Action Network going on this weirdo rant about the evil orange man and how bad and evil and orange he is and how stunning and brave her, Letitia James, is because she stands up to the President of the United States and she won't back down from him. And if you guys will remember, Letitia James, when she was running for office the first time, promised that she was going to find a way to sue Trump into bankruptcy, again, during the Democratic primary when she had no evidence that he committed any sort of crime. Let me play that clip for you because some people on the left are in dispute of whether or not it exists.
I've taken on powerful interests like developers. I've taken on legislators. I've taken on landlords. I've taken on powerful interests in the city of New York because I believe in a good fight. And right now, what we need is someone who understands that you should not be afraid, not be fearful of Donald Trump. We should take him down. We should sue him all the way to bankruptcy. We should investigate his business interests. We should investigate his business holdings. We should investigate whether or not why he was once in debt and now in a position to purchase all of this property. We can do that because I've been trained to do that, and I will do that at the same time knowing the Office of Attorney General and its powers and its responsibilities and its duties. My name is Letitia James, and I plan on being the next Attorney General of the state of New York. God bless you and thank you.
Now, of course, if Letitia James actually did try this while in office, this would obviously be an abuse of power. So thankfully, that was just campaign rhetoric. She didn't try to reinterpret a really old law and apply it in a way that it's never been applied in order to sue Trump over something related to real estate paperwork where neither party was alleging that there was any issue. Oh wait, she definitely did. And if you'll recall, she ended up getting a judgment of something like $455 million against the president and was all excited that she was going to be able, because he didn't have those assets liquid, to steal his properties and start selling them.
If he does not have funds to pay off the judgment, then we will seek, judgment enforcement mechanisms in court, and we will ask the judge to seize his assets. And so at the end of the day, how he pays for the judgment is really not my business. At the end of the day, he is responsible and liable for $363 million plus $100 million in interest.
And of course, she thought she was going to get away with this, but immediately when appeal was actually allowed to go through, we started to see even the New York State higher courts question the methods that were utilized and the law that was applied here.
May it please the court, Judith Vale for the New York Attorney General's office. All of the defendants repeatedly violated...
Ms. Vale, can you identify any previous case in which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners, where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence, where the supposed wrongdoer advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers to conduct its own due diligence and to draw its own conclusions, where the alleged misrepresentation almost entirely concerned inherently subjective valuations of properties and businesses.
Yes.
Now, that particular case is still pending appeal, so we will look at that down the road when it actually ends up being finally adjudicated. But for right now, we're not talking about the evil orange man. We're not talking about him potentially fudging the numbers or lying about the square footage of a certain building in order to get better terms on a loan. We're talking about Letitia James, who, unsurprisingly, right now, according to documents obtained by various news agencies, is in fact accused of lying about her state of residence in order to secure better terms on a loan related to real estate. No, I'm not kidding about this, and that's what we're going to break down today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
Sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And so, DEI, as far as I am concerned, is more than about just black people. Let's be honest.
That's right.
DEI is about paid parental leave. DEI is about disabled children. DEI includes a number of categories. So when they talk about DEI, let them know that they're not only coming after us, but they're coming after all of us. And we've got to stand together, a stand-in community, stand with this great organization under the leadership of our civil rights leader, Reverend Al Sharpton, who has been a bright and shining light in the darkness.
So we're going to talk about the little issue at hand, and then we'll talk about the big issue. So the little issue related to this Norfolk, Virginia property that Letitia James owns with another person is that she ends up listing the value of this property somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, despite the fact that the original purchase price for this property appears to be around $250,000. And in fact, there seems to be about $400,000 worth of loans associated with it, so it seems like a big stretch that she's claiming that this particular property is only worth $100 to $150K. That being said, that's a small issue. We all understand, or at least we used to understand, the difference between a tax assessed value and a market value, so I think it's something right there that we could take note of, but we should set aside for this very moment. What's actually interesting in this particular article is a document that's buried in a series of filings from Letitia James from August 17th of 2023 that has a declaration of Letitia James and the person that she bought the property with, who is acting as her power of attorney at the time, that both people were going to be or intended to make Norfolk, Virginia their primary residence at the time that they were making this agreement. And the reason why this needed to be signed in this way is because Letitia James was in New York, as the Attorney General of New York at the time, so she had to give power of attorney to this woman in order to handle this matter. But in addition to that, they needed to make this their primary residence in order to get certain terms on the loans, lower interest rate, all these other different various things. But this, of course, runs into a major conflict, because how can the state attorney general for the state of New York claim that the state of Virginia is her primary residence or her principal residence, as it says in this particular document? And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You don't even have to take this particular article's word for it. The document page is right here. The PDF is completely attached. So right here it says, the specific power of attorney, known all men by these presents, that the undersigned Letitia A. James does hereby constitute and appoint Shamise Thompson Hairston of the city of Norfolk and the state of Virginia as her attorney, in fact, in her name, place, and stead, to undertake and do all the acts necessary to complete the purchase of the property. And it lists the address right there, but I think I'm actually going to block this out. Now it says execution of the deed of the trust in loan of an amount that should not exceed $225,000, execution of the real estate settlement Procedures Act forms, execution of the note, miscellaneous loan, closing documents not to exceed $225,000, and execution of the purchase agreement and addendums with sales not to exceed $250,000. And then it follows with saying, I hereby declare that I intend to occupy this property as my principal residence. Now look, to be 100% clear to everybody out there in the audience, I am not in any way, shape, or form a real estate attorney, an expert on commercial real estate, or anything of the sort. sort. However, my wife actually completed law school. She actually has worked in a real estate firm, a commercial real estate firm, for well over a decade, so she would be an expert in what exactly this means. So of course, throughout the course of the making of this video, I did not even remotely suggest that I needed her expertise at all whatsoever, and I did not consult with her because, you know, I like to shoot from the hip and see where we end up. Okay, so all joking aside, I actually did consult with the wife who does work in commercial real estate, and what she told me is that typically on the documents that they use, they refer to this as the primary residence, but every single source that I could find basically says that the primary and principal residence mean the same thing. According to the IRS, your principal residence is actually your primary home, and you can only have one of them as an individual person, and Letitia James delegating power of attorney to this woman and then declaring that she had the principal residence inside the state of Virginia is not only an objective lie, because obviously she's the state attorney general in the state of New York, but if it's not a lie, then she fails the residency requirement for the position of attorney general of the state of New York, and something's gotta give right there. Now, since this is a document from Letitia James giving this woman power of attorney, you might have noticed at the bottom of the document that it is page 1 of 2. Well, the very next page has Letitia James signing this power over to this particular woman, again in black and white, so you would assume that the New York State Attorney General would have read both pages, or at least read the first page, which is the one before the signing page, before actually initiating that signature. So Letitia James is declaring that this person has the power of attorney, that she has it in these limited circumstances, and in addition to that, that her primary residence, or in reality her principal residence, which is the legal term utilized by the IRS, is in North Fork, Virginia, aka not the state of New York, which is in fact a lie. It is not true. She did not intend after the purchase of this home to make this place her principal residence. She did not intend to move to North Fork, Virginia, and maybe you could make the argument that she's saying, oh, after this is settled, that she will eventually do this because maybe she was counting on in the future Biden winning a second term or joining the Kamala Harris administration or something ridiculous and absurd of the sort. But the fact is, this is August 17th of 2023, so that's really far out.
But I don't know about you. It's that stone of hope that inspires me each and every day. And listen, faith and fear can never share the same space. And so I'm covered by the blood. And I'm not afraid of Donald Trump. You can come after me, but no enemy, nothing formed against me will perish. Nothing formed against me. Nothing formed against me. Nothing formed against me.
All right. Again, I'll take place.
But back to the white collar fraud article. It says those words appear in black and white in a specific power of attorney signed by Letitia James and filed on August 17th, 2023, authorizing her relative, Shamise Thompson Harrison, to act on her behalf in a transaction that included the declaration. They were not written by a lawyer acting on James's behalf. They were her own words, intent, and signature. This signed power of attorney is a smoking gun on its own, completely separate from how the mortgage might be interpreted. It stands as a clear declaration of intent from a sitting New York Attorney General to establish principal residency in another state. While joint ownership arrangements sometimes involve owners with different primary residences, this case is different. The declaration in the power of attorney specifically states James's intention to make this property her principal residence, and the mortgage requires both borrowers to establish the residency. This raises questions about whether such a declaration was made primarily to secure preferential mortgage terms. Now look, I totally agree with this white collar article that on its own, that declaration that North Fork, Virginia is going to be her primary state of residence is absolutely crucial. It is absolutely something that technically should make her not qualified to be the New York State Attorney General, or possibly she did so fraudulently in order to get better terms on the loan, which by the way is something that months later she would go on to charge President Trump for in the civil suit that again she tried to get the $455 million adjudication, which she did secure, that is currently right now in the process of appeal. But to make things even more ridiculous is that if you'll remember, another thing that she was going after him for was misrepresenting the size of penthouses, how many units are there, whether or not you could build up more units and all these sorts of other things. But apparently that's also something that Letitia James keeps doing, because she has a property that either has 5 units that are rentable and occupiable, or 4. It changes from form to form. And again, like I said, just a few months later, she would announce that crazy case against President Trump in which she got that judgment. And the thing is, President Trump had this stuff prepared to him by his attorneys. Now, obviously, he had to sign this documentation, so there's levels of responsibility that he ends up having to deal with. But in addition to that, the other firms, the people that were lending him this money, they conducted their own investigation, and what they ultimately ended up doing was setting their own determination of what they thought his assets were worth and whatnot. Letitia James is doing this on a much smaller scale, but it's also a much more personal scale. Again, if you own a 5-unit building or 4-unit building, you should be able to know whether you own a 5-unit building or 4-unit building. If you are a lawyer, the Attorney General for the state of New York, you should know whether or not you intend to make Virginia your primary state of residence when you give a relative the power of attorney to purchase said property. It seems like it's rather ridiculous that she wouldn't know this, but again, she is allowed to prosecute somebody for this on one end, and of course do this on her own because she's above the law. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because technically what Letitia James would be accused of doing if somebody had the stones to prosecute her for this is fraud. She lied on this particular documentation in order to get better financial terms on a mortgage, even though she never intended to make that property her primary residence, or in the case of the language in this particular letter, the principal residence of her. But if she did intend to do that, and if she's going to argue in court that her principal residence is in fact North Fork, Virginia, then she also, that very day that she made that declaration that she was going to be a resident of Virginia, was actually not the Attorney General anymore. In fact, New York state law could not be more clear on this subject matter. It says, when an office holder removes his residence from the territorial limits required by the statute, the office is rendered vacant. So again, it appears to me, again, a layman in this particular department, that Letitia James either committed fraud in order to obtain this mortgage, or was not the actual Attorney General in the state of New York, because the office has to be vacant when she gives up her residency at the time that she filed that particular case against President Trump. One of these two things, again, from my layman interpretation of these facts, has to be true based on the documentation, and I find that to be an absolutely fascinating development, but not a surprising development. Now, if you want to read more on this and read about other things that Letitia James is very questionable about in terms of disclosure to New York State in compliance with our record laws, then that will be linked in the description of this video. But unsurprisingly, she, of course, decided that she had to go to the National Action Network and have this big moment because Al Sharpton, like Letitia James, also has a very questionable history with these sorts of things. But as of right now, I want to leave it right here because I want to know what you guys think about this all in the comments below. And if you think that maybe I should dig a little deeper into the New York State Attorney General and this possible fraud that she quite literally just a few weeks later decided to prosecute the evil orange man for. Again, if you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about New York State Attorney General Letitia James getting caught up in a trap. Till next time.